Alright class, got a pretty important lesson for you guys today. Today we're talking about mistakes. We all make them. Some are tiny, like accidentally liking your ex's Instagram post from 2016. Guilty. Others, well, they shape the course of human history. For example, humanity once thought, hey, let's settle disagreements with world wars. Spoiler alert, it was a pretty bad idea to go to war with the world. But we learned. We invented the United Nations and we said, let's talk it out instead of, blowing everything up. It's like when you realize that yelling during a Monopoly game only ends with someone flipping the board over. Then there's my buddy Rusty. A much smaller scale mistake, but he got into a fight with his best friend and refused to apologize. Weeks went by, months went by, and he's miserable. So miserable that he starts arguing with his Roomba for company. Eventually, he says sorry and boom, friendship saved. The moral? Apologizing is way easier than trying to make small talk with a vacuum cleaner. Here's the thing. Mistakes are like a bad karaoke performance. They're cringeworthy in the moment, but they make for great stories later. And just like a bad karaoke performance, people are always watching mistakes thinking, what the hell is this guy doing? And that's how people learn from mistakes. Pretty beautiful, don't you think? By the way, I'm no stranger to mistakes myself. Like, the last time I tried to fix my own haircut, yeah, that ended horribly. But I learned my lesson. The next time I had to fix my haircut, I went to a proper barber, and my hair never looked better. Oh, and by the way, mistakes don't have to be terrible for people to gain something from them. I'm sure all of you guys have eaten a dumpling before, but none of you guys probably knew that dumplings were invented by accident, from a cooking error. But look how popular they've become. What I'm trying to say, class, is that mistakes are not abnormal at all. Mistakes are what make us human. People make mistakes every day, and without mistakes, we would never get anywhere as a society, or even as people. So, everyone, raise your hand if you've made a mistake in the last 24 hours. You're not raising your hand. You're still not raising your hand. Alright, good. Me too. And I'll never stop making them either, because I'm only human, and all humans make... So, my YouTube analytics says that 1% of all my viewers are Mesochryseides hamsters, but as long as that Mesochryseides hamster isn't watching this particular video, I'm sure that we're all just people here. And since we're all people, I want to share with you guys the 3 types of mistakes that I've observed in my life. The first kind I'll just call cognitive mistakes, errors that occur due to just bad reasoning, bad judgment, or incorrect assumptions. Like the time I went to Spain. I promised myself I would never urinate in my pants in my adulthood, but due to my own bad judgment, I decided not to use the bathroom before I went on a long hike, and well, you guys can do the math on that one. But even now when I look back on those mistakes, I don't blame myself because it was my first time traveling abroad. I think these cognitive mistakes happen due to our own limited knowledge or mental shortcuts. Our mind is always making shortcuts because we always want the easy way out or we want to avoid thinking too much. Pissing myself wasn't the only mistake I made in Spain. I made a lot of them because of my own limited knowledge about the country. But now, looking back on it, it taught me a lot about thinking first before I do anything. The second kind of mistakes I've observed are behavioral mistakes, which are stuff that happens when we're doing actions or execute something which we already know about. It's like a scientist who works in a lab and who's been working in a lab for a long time. Your hands and muscle memory get used to being a scientist in a lab, but sometimes you still make errors like pouring the wrong chemical into the wrong test tube. I'm pretty sure these kind of mistakes are just unavoidable. The only thing we can do is stop punishing ourselves for them. It's like the time I went to Disney World and the park worker told us that the line for Tower of Terror would only be 5 minutes. But when we finally got there, it turns out the line was more like 2 hours. You would think the worker would be an expert on line wait times, but behavioral mistakes always happen, so I don't really blame the guy. Sometimes we just have a slip of the hand or our mind just malfunctions, even when we're doing something we are already good at. And the last kind of mistake I'd like to call a group mistake. It's when a bunch of people make a shared mistake together. It reminds me of the time I went to Hawaii and I heard a lot about Pearl Harbor. On December 7th, 1941, I heard the US military was just collectively doing their things. Everyone got their assigned job, and sure, there were some radar blips earlier that morning, but they thought, hey, it's probably just planes doing their thing, right? Well, a bunch of small assumptions snowballed, and the radar operators thought someone higher up would check it out. But the higher-ups thought it was a drill, and before you knew it, surprise, the Japanese fleet has RSVP'd without warning. Just like with all mistakes, we can all learn something from stories like these. It applies to everything, like work, friend groups, and school. I think the answer to these kind of mistakes is just to communicate properly. It's like doing a school project when no one really knows each other that well and no one communicates anything with each other. Eventually, no one has any idea what anyone's in charge of, and it starts snowballing and snowballing until the entire project ends up going bad. All three kinds of mistakes are extremely avoidable, but I think if we pour so much energy into avoiding mistakes all the time and being perfectionist, it's just going to be a huge waste of energy. We're all going to make mistakes anyway, as much as we try to avoid them, so maybe we should all just try to embrace them. But on a serious note, I understand that embracing mistakes isn't always a good idea. Some mistakes can be life-altering, or even life-threatening. On these rare occasions, I would probably advise you guys not to embrace them, but try avoiding them in the first place. If there's something that could really alter the course of your life, and you know it for sure, then think a lot beforehand. There's a good balance between being impulsive and being a thoughtful person. But inevitably, if something bad happens even when you take all the measures to stop it, then don't blame yourself. It's beyond your control. Alright class, so I hope we've all learned a lot about mistakes this week. We've all made them, big ones, small ones, the kinds that keep you awake at night wondering why liking your ex's Instagram post from 2016 was ever a good idea. But here's the deal, mistakes aren't just embarrassing, they're like free lessons. Okay, maybe sometimes they're expensive lessons, but lessons nonetheless. I hope after watching this, you guys are not afraid anymore to make mistakes. I mean, mistakes are just proof that you're out there doing stuff, trying new things, and occasionally falling flat on your face in front of everyone. But that's just life. If you're not making mistakes, you're not learning, growing, or living. Learn to embrace your mistakes, laugh at them, learn from them, and maybe even share them at parties for some good stories. Because the only people who don't make any mistakes are the ones who never try anything new. And honestly, where's the fun in that? Ironically, I've probably made a lot of mistakes in this video. I might not be the perfect narrator to teach everyone about mistakes, but I know a thing or two about them, cause I made a lot of them in the past. Just remember one thing, desperately trying to live avoiding mistakes will be your worst mistake yet. Alright guys and Mesocracetus hamsters, that's all. See ya.